Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this live Facebook broadcast. We're on YouTube and Twitter also. I'm joined this evening by Michelle O'Neill, a good woman from Clonoe in County Tyrone and joint head of government in the north, by Pearse Doherty, TD from the county of Donegal, a TD, and of course our chief negotiator after the election. He's also our finance spokesperson and the Minister for Finance in waiting. And by our colleague and friend Eoin O'Brien, elected in Dublin Midway, and certainly by any measure the man who should be and the man who someday will be the Minister for Housing. So you're very, very welcome. You'll have heard the news breaking that the deal is now done. Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Green Party have now signed on for government on the basis of the programme for government that they published some time back. So you all know that the last election was an election all about change. You know that we put forward a manifesto of change to the people, and you know that Sinn Féin received a record mandate, a mandate to be in government. You also know, and I think you probably aren't too surprised, that the political establishment rallied to keep us out. So that is where it sits as we meet this evening. We're going to talk about all manner of political issues this evening. Everything about Sinn Féin now leading the opposition, about housing policy, about the economy, about childcare. But before we do that, I just want to say to you very, very directly that all of you, all of us who believe in change, that change is still possible. It's still within our grasp. It's still within our reach. Just because we've hit a bump in the road, just because the old political establishment have put up some barrier in our way, that's not going to stop us. And it really shouldn't stop you, because all of the things that we have to do together, all of us as citizens, as activists and as political leaders, they're far too important for any of us to give up. So we're not giving up. We're never giving up. And let me start then on that note with some of the questions that have come in. We've hundreds of questions. We're not going to get through all of them, but as usual, we'll do our best to cover as much ground as we can. So Patricia, good evening, Patricia. Tells us that she voted for Sinn Féin for the first time. Thank you, Patricia, because we deserve the chance to make things better than the two who have always been in power. And Patricia's asking the question, can we change things in opposition? Celia, hello, Celia is in with the same question. And Celia says, sometimes opposition is the place to be, to put pressure on for change. I'd rather see in government and fulfill the change that has been promised, but opposition, leading the opposition is a big deal too. I agree with that. Michelle, can I ask you just to come in on that point to kick us off?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks to everybody for joining us again this evening. It is a hugely significant evening where the wagons have been circled to exclude Sinn Féin again from government, but we don't give up. The mandate that you asked for only 4 months ago when you asked for change, we're determined to deliver that change. And whilst we want to be in government, we are going to be, because of the scenario that we now find ourselves in, we're going to be the most effective opposition, and we can make huge strides forward, and we can make sure that we stand up on an ongoing basis to give workers and families a break. We're going to stand up for the ordinary person, and we're going to hold this government to account. We demonstrate every day in the north of this island, where I'm joint head of government, where we are in government, we're there fighting the corner for families, and we continue to do that. So the challenge ahead of us is a challenge which we take on because we stand up for the ordinary person, because we will deliver and build support. We have not given up, because McDonald is the Taoiseach in waiting, and there's no doubt in my mind that Pearse Doherty is the finance minister in waiting, and Eoin is absolutely the housing minister in waiting. So continue to work with us. We are going to deliver the change, and we're going to hold these boys to account.
And Pearse, we have Geraldine in here wishing us luck. Thanks a million, Geraldine, and saying to us, keep the pressure on. Sandra is in now saying, as an opposition party, you'll have your work cut out for you, but you have to protect the people, protect our rights as much as possible, and then wait, because there'll be other elections, and when the next election comes, we'll be waiting and ready, and so will we, Sandra, as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, Sandra. There's no doubt about it that we will have our work cut out for us. We would as well if we were in government, because the type of ambition that we have for our country, that we have for our people, is huge. They're the conversations that we had as a negotiating team, myself leading up the team with Eoin Ryan and the Green Party. We talked about the ambition that we had, how we can transform society, how we can make public childcare a public service, how we can actually build the biggest number of houses ever seen in the history of the state, how we can build capacity in health and do all the things that people so much desire for. People who voted for change in that election, who've seen the possibility for the first time ever of the two parties who held on to power for nearly a century, and how there was a real potential to do something different. And I know a lot of people, Mary Lou, will be frustrated out there, as we are as well, because we know the best place for us to deliver that change is in government, is holding the positions of power and actually driving through that change. But change is unstoppable, and it's not just us, it's going to be the people with us, and that's why we know it's unstoppable, because we know that desire for change hasn't just stayed at the same pace since February. It's actually increased, and we can feel that out amongst the people, the community, people who are coming, texting us and calling us and sending us good wishes. So, it's very clear we have a very strong team, and Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Green Party, if they go into government tomorrow morning, they are going to see one hell of an opposition that is united, that is coherent, that isn't just opposing for the sake of opposing, because we're going to lead the change. We're going to show how we can deliver on the big issues, because this is what the time for big ideas, for big vision, and the programme for government that have just been endorsed by those three parties fails miserably in relation to those issues.
So Teresa is here, and she says, I'm so sad that you're not going to be in power in government. You're the people's choice. And I just know that you would look after the old age pensions. You're absolutely right, Teresa. That issue of decent work, of working people having a chance, having a decent level of income, and critically, at the age of 65, when most people in their working life at that stage, you've done your bit, you've paid your dues, you deserve to have choice and the opportunity to retire at that age with your pension. We have not given them that, and no matter how much flip-flopping or empty rhetoric others might deliver on that, we're absolutely serious about it, because we happen to believe that that's the mark of a decent society. Doesn't mean that everyone has to retire at the age of 65, far from it, but it does mean that at that stage, working people, having worked all their lives, have the option. We think that's a reasonable thing and a progressive thing. For me, reading the programme for government, I mean, it's long. It's there's a lot of words, but in many cases, very little meaning. But if any section gave me cause for alarm most, it was the section on housing, because it's got Fine Gael's fingerprints all over. There's nothing new about this. This is a recipe for more of the same. And I want to tell you, for us, that's not acceptable. And we're not going to sit idly by when people are priced out of ever owning their own home and can't meet their mortgages or make their rent or any of those things. So, Eoin, I have a load of questions in here on housing. Let me just start with Alice. So Alice says she's no faith in this new government. She's no faith they can solve the housing crisis for herself, for her friends. She says that this was the defining issue of the election. She wants to be able to buy her home someday, but she feels hopeless about it. We voted for change. We didn't do that just to have the same old parties with the same old saying and no solutions, and left in a situation where things just haven't worked. And Alice, Eoin, how many Alices are out there?
No, you're absolutely right, Mary Lou and Alice. Thanks for raising such an important issue. I mean, we have tens of thousands of people who are either currently renting with high rents, they're in private accommodation with high mortgages, or they're not able to get on the property ladder and able to get into the rental market. We've also a huge number of people waiting on local authority waiting lists, in some cases 12 to 14 years. And we still have far too many people homeless. For me, one of the telling things is the latest homeless figures were published yesterday. They show a very dramatic drop in family homelessness in the last 2 months. The sole reason for that is because there is a ban on evictions into homelessness. Sinn Féin tabled legislation 3 years ago that would have given effect to such a ban, and Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael voted against it. They said it wasn't possible, it wasn't constitutional. COVID-19 comes along, and of course they introduce a temporary ban. If they had supported our legislation 3 years ago, hundreds, if not thousands, of families who went on to spend large periods of time in emergency accommodation would never become homeless. But most differently, have an incredible strategy for affordable housing for working people and single people to buy and own or rent at affordable rates. Almost all of the text is a rehash of what was in the 2016 Fine Gael programme, in the failed Rebuilding Ireland housing strategy. And just like Pearse said, we're not just going to go into opposition to moan and criticise the government. We have very, very clear, credible and costed proposals. For example, as how you would deliver good quality 2 and 3 bedroom homes in Dublin to purchase for €230,000 or less, and outside of Dublin for €220,000 or less. We have proposals for the delivery of really good quality 2 bedroom accommodation in Dublin for rent for €700 to €900. What are Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael offering? Well, they're offering homes for purchase allegedly affordable from €310,000 to €360,000 in your own constituency, Mary Lou, as you know, O'Devney Gardens, and rents in Dublin at €1,300. People are so detached from the hard reality of working families trying to get affordable accommodation, they don't even know what price they're pitching it at. So I have to say, and it gives me no pleasure to say it, I'm genuinely worried that we're going to see a significant increase in the level of housing need. Today, for example, we launched a survey. We surveyed over 1,000 renters from across the country, asked them how were they affected by COVID-19. 60% have lost income. Many of those people are falling into significant arrears of between €3,000 and €5,000. And we have yet to hear any credible plan, and there is no indication in the programme for government how that rent arrears debt burden is going to be dealt with. So what are we going to do? We're going to keep our word. We're going to keep arguing for better solutions, and we're going to hold this government account, because somebody has to stand up for renters, for working families who want to buy and rent affordably, and of course for those families in emergency accommodation and waiting for council housing. And we will continue to champion their cause day and night in the coming weeks and months.
And Eoin, I've actually two contributions here. One from Sean, the other from Dylan. Good evening to both of you. Sean says that rents were too high before the pandemic, and once the rent freeze is lifted, he's fearful that he's one bad month away from being made homeless. He's a single dad, and he needs hope. He says, I need reassurance. I need someone to reassure me. And Dylan, another young man, and he says he's finding it really difficult to get a home of his own. And he asks, is there anything I can do? He wants to know, because private landlords are just not interested in young people renting. So those are two clear-cut cases of exactly what you've been describing, Eoin.
Absolutely, and look, I talk to people like Sean and Dylan every day, as all of the Sinn Féin councillors and TDs and senators across the state. The first thing I'd say to Dylan is get active, become involved, join Sinn Féin and help us in our work. Get involved in campaigns like Raise the Roof, being led by the trade union movement in the housing and homelessness sector. Get involved in your local community, because the more of us that are involved in campaigning for change, the more likely that change is going to come about quickly. And we've plenty of work to do, Dylan, no matter what part of the country you're in. So our door is open. And the real problem for folks like Sean, of course, is there simply isn't affordable accommodation out there. I looked at the programme there recently, having read it a few times, and in fact, the draft programme has less social houses to be delivered over the next 5 years than Fine Gael promised in their manifesto. It doesn't have the 50,000 affordable homes that Fianna Fáil promised during the general election. It has nothing meaningful for renters, and my office is working on legislation as we speak to introduce a ban on rent increases over 3 years, but also to ensure, for example, that tenants can't be evicted into homelessness, for example, when a landlord wants to sell the property. So we will be tabling from the very, very start of this all term good quality, strong legislation to protect renters, to promote social and affordable housing, and to ensure everybody, no matter what their income is, has access to an appropriate, secure and affordable home. That's a basic human right, and we will be champions of that right for as long as this very poor government lasts.
So just to say to Sean and Dylan and to Alice and to everyone else who is alarmed now that such a bad government with such a catastrophic track record on housing is now about to come into office. I just want you to know, housing for us is an absolute priority. We have discussed this amongst ourselves. We've discussed this amongst our actors. We're not tolerating Dylan and Sean and Alice and everyone else another 3 or 4 years like the 3 or 4 and 5 years that we've just gone through. So they'll be in government, but as Pearse, as you were saying earlier on, I believe you me, they will be under pressure from minute one of day one of this administration on the issue of housing and on other issues. But I know that accommodation and housing is such a current pressing need right across our country. Here's Patrick has been, and he wants to know, this is his challenge to, he says, Sinn Féin, keep a tab on spending on the other three parties. Show them up at every given opportunity so the public are constantly informed of any increases. And I think what he has in mind is specifically politician pay. Patrick, you don't say that explicitly, but that's what I think you're getting at there. Pearse, no better man than Pearse Doherty to keep them on their toes. I can assure you on that score.
Yeah, absolutely, Mary Lou, and we'll do that. And you know, like again, what people don't know, or many people don't know, is again politicians are expected to get another pay rise at the end of the year. So you hear a lot of Fianna Fáil and Gael politicians giving out about people who've lost their jobs and having to rely on temporary wage subsidy schemes or pandemic unemployment payments, whether you're in the childcare sector or you're in the hospitality sector. You don't know what happens after August if that lifeline is going to be withdrawn from you. But what they won't tell you is that at a couple of weeks after August, they're going to get a couple of €1,000 wage increases, as TDs have been getting every year over the last period. So, and you can see worse again in their programme for government, actually, them same junior ministers and ministers who are earning above €100,000 are now going to get a tax cut as a result of the deal that's been cobbled together between Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Green Party. So let there be no doubt about it. We will be keeping them on their toes in relation to that, making sure that, and also informing the people. I think that point is well made, that making sure that people know exactly just what is happening, because it's through public pressure, it is through information and giving that people that power to actually try and help us effect change as well. So that's without a doubt, we'll continue to do that.
And Pearse, Gina is on. Her insurance has doubled this year and she's on her second full licence. 8 years of a no claims bonus, and she has an emoji face that looks only raging. I won't try and imitate it. And she says she had to change companies again. I mean, this insurance thing for drivers, particularly for younger drivers, as we know, but also much more broadly across everything from childcare providers to small businesses to community facilities. Gina wants to ask about this, and there's another one as well, Pearse, that's in specifically for you, and it's about the COVID-19 mortgage break.
Oh yeah.
And this Mia, hello Mia, took a break. She works in a bar. She's a single mum. Started paying the mortgage in July, dreading the increased monthly. She starts again, I should say, paying in July, and she's just dreading the increase because of the interest that's been added on. Pearse has been really active on this issue. So will you say a few words on both of those?
Yeah, well, look, to Gina isn't alone. They're seeing, insurance companies have a free hand here because of the current government. They've taken a very softy approach to the insurance industry, despite the fact that they're in an industry under investigation by the Competition Authority because of cartel-like activities. They're an industry that were raided a number of years ago and done raids and assets seized and so on and so forth because of their activities. And we know the type of fleecing that they're doing of motorists and indeed of small businesses as well, and many community groups and those in the voluntary sector. So I think Gina has talked about moving companies time and time again. There's a practice within the insurance industry that's called dual pricing. So it is the right advice to move around, but that's just not good enough. We as legislators have a responsibility, and indeed the central bank as well has a responsibility to protect people from these type of sectors that are preying on individuals and charging them an arm and a leg. And that's what's happened in other jurisdictions. Indeed, in America, the likes of dual pricing is banned in most states. In Britain, it's about to be banned, and we've drafted legislation to ban it here. But and there's a lot more that we're doing in terms of insurance as well. But it probably speaks to me about where the priorities of this government is, because 3 years ago, Mary Lou, you'll know that I introduced legislation on behalf of the party 3 years ago last January. It's been described as the most radical piece of insurance reform in 100 years. By the Alliance of Insurance Reform, it's been described as a game changer. Leo Varadkar held that up for 2 years, but as a result of public pressure from people talking about it and pushing on it, we got it through. It was eventually signed into law by the Dáil and the Seanad, signed by the President. What happened afterwards? That happened at Christmas. What happened afterwards was Paschal Donohoe, the Minister for Finance, sat down with the industry, and the industry told him, we don't want this. And Paschal Donohoe has blocked that bill now for 6 months. And that's, again, just speaks to me about who the interests of this government and the previous government are. It's never about the ordinary person. It's all about the vested interest. And the banks is just another example of that there in terms of Mia's case. In right throughout Europe, if you're a citizen in Germany, if you're a citizen in Spain, if you're a citizen in Belgium, their governments have legislated to make sure that banks don't exploit their customers who have mortgages during this period. Indeed, 12 countries across Europe has done this. In Ireland, what have we done? Or what has the government done? The government has allowed banks to charge interest during the payment break period, which means that people like me, and I'm getting these cases on a daily basis, people that are charged €12,000 extra in terms of their mortgage repayments because they lost their jobs, they had no income or little income during the period, and they needed to take a 3-month break because of a pandemic that was threatening the lives of everybody across the state. It's absolutely appalling that our government has again taken the side of the banks, while governments right across Europe, including the likes of Germany, who's a conservative government, have said, no, we're going to protect our citizens. So we've introduced legislation. It's one of the first pieces that I'll be introducing in the Dáil to show the government that this can be done, that you can stand up for ordinary interests and you should be taking on the vested interests of the banks and the insurance industry.
And again, this is one of these long playing issues, and we've been at this, Pearse, now a long time. We're years pursuing this, and we're not giving up on it. I mean, so if the banks, if the insurance industry, if any of the kind of cosseted, protected, vested interests think that the pressure will come off because they have this government in place now, that would be a very, very serious error on their part. So we will keep at that.
And can I say, Mary Lou, just to do a wee plug there, because Uplift, the campaigning online campaigning website, have actually chosen this legislation that's been blocked by Paschal Donohoe on insurance as their campaign, and they've launched a major petition on this here. And I would encourage anybody who's watching this to go in. It'll only take you a second, put your name to it, and demand that Paschal Donohoe implement the bill and stop protecting insurance companies over the rights of ordinary motorists or small businesses.
Excellent. That is a very, very good initiative by Uplift. Aoife's on. Hello, Aoife. Aoife's a lone parent. Good job, but she's struggling every month to pay the bills. The uncertainty of the crisis has her worried sick. What lies ahead for my little family? And she wants to know what support Sinn Féin will be fighting for people like us. And Aoife, you are one of many. Many of the people that we are so proud to represent that are like that, out working, looking after your little family and struggling week to week. So Eoin, speak to Aoife, then I'm going to come to Michelle on this as well, because really this is the bottom line, isn't it? This is the bottom line of government. Any government worthy of the name has to deliver for Aoife and for all of the Aoifes that live across our island.
Absolutely, and that package of measures that we talked about during the election in terms of affordable childcare, affordable housing, and access to good quality, affordable healthcare, including healthcare, for example, for children with special needs and those with disabilities, remains central to our political programme. And again, you know, when you have senior medical professions like John Crown writing in the newspapers at the weekend that the draft programme for government is going to solidify the two-tier health system, and keep in mind 20% of working people have either access to health insurance or medical cards, you can see the kind of problems we're going to have. So affordability of those key services is essential. But what we're also arguing for is many working families, and Aoife may be one of these, are racking up significant levels of debt at the moment. Maybe they have rent or debt for rent, maybe for mortgages or the additional interest that's been charged. Maybe it's utility bills or other charges. And it's simply not acceptable for any government to say that on the other side of COVID-19, all of those working people should just be left handling that debt on their own. Myself and my colleague David Cullinan, who's working on the social protection portfolio at the moment, we've been working on a series of proposals to have a kind of a debt resolution mechanism, a formal mechanism where people that have COVID-related debt can we've been arguing that the Residential Tenancy Court should be able to hear cases on rent arrears debt and be given the powers to write down some or all of that debt if that's appropriate. Banks have a big role to play here. They haven't been giving, for example, good landlords proper moratoria, landlords that want to.
Is Eoin frozen?
Seems to be.
Seems to be.
Are you frozen? You have frozen on us. Eoin with the... Anyway, Owen's been talking there.
Am I still here?
You were frozen.
Am I back now, Mary?
You're back now. You've thawed out, Eoin.
I'm in the basement of 44, and despite the tropical weather outside, it's cold, so it's probably that. But I was just saying that, for example, we desperately need a debt resolution mechanism, one that the banks play their part, one that landlords play their part, and the state does. So these are things we're going to keep fighting for, and we'll do from the very day that the Dáil convenes tomorrow, and again on Tuesday. Working families, particularly working families on modest incomes, need a party to have their back, and whether it's on health, housing, childcare or debt, we'll be that party every single day while this government lasts.
Okay, so just on the issue of debt, we know that MABS, that agency is saying that they're expecting real problems with household debt. So to all of the struggling families out there who are worried, really, really worried now, Sinn Féin will be working on these issues, and not just in the Dáil. We'll be working with agencies and with people outside of the Dáil, beyond politics, because we're going to have to look after each other in what are going to be very challenging times. And of course, these issues and challenges, Michelle, are island-wide, as we know. I mean, these are national challenges. It's no different for families struggling and worrying and concerned, if in Belfast and Derry and in Tyrone and Fermanagh.
Absolutely, and I think Aoife's example is just a typical example of many families out there working hard, doing their bit, but still struggling to be able to get through to the end of the month. And I think that's the people that we are very, very proud to represent. So Aoife, we have your back, and we will continue to make sure that we force the change that's required and that you voted for in the last election. I think that whenever we look at what's happening here, we have a government being formed with the same tried and tested and failed policies, but yet they're going to deliver and offer the public more of the same. That's not going to be acceptable to Sinn Féin. So Aoife, we have your back, and we have your families back, and that's Eoin's, talked about the number of things that we intend to hold this government's feet to the fire on. But it is the same challenges no matter where you live on this island. Every family faces all of these things. So we have a Pearse and executive in the north, and I'm a joint head of that government. And the challenges that I see every day, I mean, the core issues for me and people's and on families' minds right now are what does school look like in September, and childcare. Childcare is a huge, huge issue. And, we're now, in this position where as the relaxations are happening, more and more people are going back to work. But yet, there's no childcare. No childcare was an issue before COVID hit. But I think the COVID situation has actually shown a light on the fact that so many families are struggling with this core issue. So that, again, is a big issue which Sinn Féin continues to champion and continues to try and deliver on. I just think that, we are probably in one of the most challenging periods in all of our lives that we'll all remember, because of the COVID crisis and the economy is on its knees. But whenever you're in a challenging situation, you have to look after those that need your help most. And that's the Sinn Féin way. And that's what we'll continue to do in the time ahead, to bring about the change that you want.
So childcare, I mean, we've countless questions on childcare, and I'm really sorry we're not going to get to. I do though want to just address one of this comes in from Alana, and Alana is raising the temporary extension of maternity leave. She mentions the 23,000 plus signatures on the petition that we received into the Dáil, and still no answers. You're absolutely right, Alana, and you will remember that when I raised this in the Dáil, Leo Varadkar, then Taoiseach, said that he heard the issue, he understood the issue, and that they would look at it seriously. But you're quite right to say there's been no action. And again, we'll be on that again, because we've argued in support of that petition, because this just makes common sense for parents with very, very young newborns in circumstances that are very, very difficult. I want to raise one last thing before we wrap up, and we could raise 100 things, but I've had questions in here on nursing homes, because I know people are concerned on this issue. I have to say, Pearse, I was astonished to hear Micheál Martin, the leader of Fianna Fáil, say that there shouldn't be any investigation or inquiry in terms of what happened in nursing homes. I found that astonishing, because the virus is still with us, and the correct thing to do, the safe thing to do, is to know what happened, so that we can, avoid any loss of life, further loss of life, avoidable loss of life in the future with this virus, because the virus is still there. Eddie is asking, do you think there will be a worthwhile investigation into the deaths of people whose families were advised by the agency to place their loved ones in nursing homes, and then those contracted the virus and died? Eddie, there has to be an investigation. I mean, this to me is, an incredible thing that there would even be a question mark around that, Pearse.
Yeah, I find that astonishing as well, because I've always said the point that it's not as a case of will there or won't there be. There has to be an investigation into this here, and it's for many, many reasons, but probably for the most important reason is that so many people have lost heart. There's so much pain, and we have to be able to give all of those families answers in relation to what has happened. And there's many other reasons why there should be. Like we've seen in the COVID committee, where Nursing Homes Ireland have come in, and we've seen it from other people witnesses who came before the committee. Like, you had a situation where people on the front line in our nursing homes were actually had to rely on painters' overalls instead of personal protective equipment to try and protect themselves. You had situations where people who should be frontline workers who should be off because of COVID-19 or who were expressing symptoms were not, and were still asked to work and so on. But the key thing here is that there has to be an inquiry. I think we'll be determined to make sure that happens, and I really think that that's the first. And it's not just a misstep, Mary. Like, that is if this is the type of leadership, that so-called leadership that Micheál Martin is going to provide, and then we're in for a very, very rough time, because this should be about politics, this issue here. This is about, this is something that happened that should never have happened in the way it did, and all of us should have agreed that there should be an inquiry. So, it is something that we'll obviously press for and pursue for all of those people who demand answers, and rightly so. And many of them are still in the grieving process and aren't even at that point. But so there has to be answers, and we need to make sure that never again do we leave our elderly people in such a vulnerable situation. People being transferred into nursing homes without tests, without proper procedures. There's so many different things that went on there that hasn't come out in the open yet.
Okay, so we have lots and lots of questions coming in. We've questions on Irish unity, on a border poll, on everything, every imaginable subject. We're not going to get to them this evening, but we will get to them, because our engagement with you will be ongoing. And look, the message from this evening, I suppose, is this, that the work continues. I mean, we still need to get housing right. We still need to get healthcare right, and childcare, and all of the services and the things that make up a decent life for people. And I mean, if you remember in the election, that's what we talked about. We talked about getting the basic things right that allow people and their families to have, ambition, and to have opportunity, and to lead a good life. That is still very much game on. Tomorrow we will go to the convention centre, and the incoming government will nominate their person for Taoiseach, And my colleagues and comrades will nominate me as the leader of Sinn Féin. And tomorrow we will stand, as we will stand every day, to represent you, to stand up for you, to articulate your needs, and to ensure that we get delivery for you. So the establishment may have succeeded in the short term, but this is very short term. This is only them buying time, because the kind of change that we are intent on, all of us, with your support, this kind of change can't be stopped. This is too big. This is our generation. This is our time. This is us writing the chapter of the history books for us, and no one's going to stop us. We believe that. We want you to believe that too. So good night. Stay tuned. We'll talk to you soon. Slán live.
Slán.